You have a desire you've already buried, something you wanted so deeply that when it didn't come, you held a funeral for it in your mind. You wrapped it in logic, told yourself it was never meant to be, and moved on. By the end of this, you'll understand why that burial was premature and how the very thing you declared dead is waiting for your voice to call it forward. The story of Lazarus is one of the most misunderstood passages in Scripture. Most people read it as a miracle about a man's physical body, a demonstration of divine power over biology. But Neville Goddard saw something far more intimate in that narrative. Lazarus represents your desire, the one you've given up on, the relationship you stopped believing could heal, the financial freedom you decided was for other people, the version of yourself you quietly abandoned somewhere around your late 20s or early 30s. When Jesus arrived at Lazarus's tomb, Martha said something that echoes in the mind of every person who's lost faith in a dream. She said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Feel the accusation in that, the timing complaint. You've said your own version of this. If the money had come sooner, if the person had stayed, if the opportunity hadn't passed. You blamed the timing because blaming the timing felt safer than examining what you actually believed. And then Martha added something even more revealing. She said, "By this time he stinks, for he has been dead 4 days." She was warning Jesus away from the tomb. She was protecting everyone from the smell of decay. This is exactly what you do with a desire you've abandoned. You build warnings around it. You tell friends you're over it. You change the subject when it comes up. You create an entire psychological barrier so you never have to open that tomb and face what's inside. The stench Martha feared is the discomfort of hope. Because hoping again, after you've already grieved, feels like a kind of madness. 4 days. In the Jewish tradition of that era, 4 days meant the soul had fully departed. 3 days left room for resuscitation. 4 days meant finality. Absolute, irreversible death. Goddard pointed to this detail deliberately. Your desire hasn't been dead for a few hours. You didn't just get disappointed last week. This is the dream you buried years ago. The one where you've already accepted the loss, reorganized your identity around its absence, and built a life that accommodates the hole it left. 4 days means you've stopped even checking the tomb. So what did Jesus do when he stood before that sealed grave? He didn't argue with Martha. He didn't explain the theology. He wept. That detail matters more than the miracle itself. He stood in front of the dead thing and felt the weight of it before he called it forward. This is where most people fail in their practice of assumption. They try to skip the feeling. They want to jump straight from it's dead to it's alive, without standing in the gap between those two states and letting the emotional reality of resurrection move through them. You can't revive what you refuse to feel. The tears came first, then the command. Lazarus, come forth. 3 words, spoken with absolute authority into the mouth of a cave that smelled like death and looked like finality. Jesus didn't whisper. He didn't ask. He called the dead thing by name and commanded it to move. Your imagination works the same way. When you return to a desire you've buried, truly return to it, with your full emotional weight behind the vision, you are standing at the mouth of your own tomb and speaking life into what you declared finished. But you have to call it by name. Vague longing won't open the stone. "I want things to get better" is a prayer with no address on the envelope. Lazarus had a name. Your desire has a specific shape, the exact income, the specific relationship, the precise state of health, the particular creative work. You have to be willing to name the thing you buried, which means you have to be willing to admit you still want it. That admission is the stone rolling away. Here's where the story gets uncomfortable for the casual reader. When Lazarus walked out, he was still wrapped in burial cloth. His face was covered. His hands were bound. He was alive, but he looked like a dead man walking. Jesus had to give a second instruction. Unbind him and let him go. Your desire, when it first begins to resurrect in your consciousness, will look the same way. It will come wrapped in old fears, covered in the cloth of past disappointment. You'll feel the stirring of possibility, and immediately your mind will start wrapping it again, reminding you of the last time you believed, the last time it fell apart, the reasons you buried it in the first place. Those grave clothes have to come off, piece by piece, and that unwinding is the sustained inner work that most people abandon too early. The grave clothes are your old story, Every time you say, "I tried that and it didn't work," you're tightening the wrapping. Every time you rehearse the failure, you're pulling the cloth over its face again. Unbinding Lazarus means you stop telling the death story. You stop reciting the eulogy you wrote for your dream. You begin to speak about it, in the privacy of your own mind, as though it's breathing, as though it has a pulse, as though it walked out of that tomb and is standing in front of you, alive and warm and real. Goddard taught that the core of this practice is feeling, the sensation in your body when the desire is fulfilled, the specific texture of relief when the debt is gone, the weight of your partner's hand in yours when the reconciliation is complete, the sound of your own voice when you speak from the version of yourself who already has what you buried. That sensory detail is the voice calling your Lazarus forward. Without it, you're just thinking about resurrection. With it, you're performing one. Consider what happened in Bethany after Lazarus walked out of that grave. The religious authorities didn't celebrate, they plotted to kill Lazarus again. A resurrected man was dangerous to their entire framework. The same thing will happen in your life when you revive a desire that everyone, including yourself, agreed was dead. The old mental structures will resist. Your logical mind will marshal arguments. Your memory will present evidence. People around you may react with discomfort because your resurrection implies that their own buried desires might also be recoverable, and they're not ready for that implication. The raised Lazarus threatened the status quo. Your raised desire will do the same. This is why the inner work requires something that looks, from the outside, like stubbornness. You have to maintain the feeling of the wish fulfilled in the face of every voice, internal and external, that insists the tomb is where your desire belongs. Martha knew Lazarus was dead. She had watched him die. She had 4 days of evidence. She had the smell, and she was wrong. Your evidence is just as compelling, and it is just as irrelevant to what's possible. There's a moment in the practice where something shifts. You'll know it because the desire stops feeling like fantasy and starts feeling like memory, like something that already happened, like you're recalling a future rather than imagining one. Goddard called this the feeling of naturalness. When living in the end stops requiring effort and becomes your default inner posture, that's when Lazarus is fully unbound, walking freely. No longer a dead man brought back to life, but simply alive. The gap between where you are and where your desire lives looks enormous from the outside. 4 days of death, years of accepted loss, a sealed tomb with a stone across the entrance. Every rational metric says it's over. But the story of Lazarus exists in Scripture for one reason: to show you that the distance between dead and alive is exactly one command spoken with conviction, one sustained assumption held past the point where your senses scream otherwise. Your desire is in that tomb right now. The stone is your certainty that it's too late. The burial cloth is every story you've rehearsed about why it didn't work. The smell is the discomfort you feel when someone suggests you try again. And your voice, the one connected to your imagination, your feeling, your sustained inner conviction, is the only thing that has ever had the authority to say those 3 words. You already know its name. You've always known. The tomb is open. Walk toward it.